Want to thank the CPM media team. They're phenomenal. They're here doing all kinds of things like taking photos and recording this for later, for online viewing. And for me, it's a blessing to work at a place that really understands the gravity of addiction and the effects on the communities, and then really steps up and puts resources behind doing things like this and the many, many other things we need to do at CPM Behavioral Health. There's probably some people I missed in that gratitude, and I hope you'll forgive me. But in the interest of time, I want to just welcome all of you. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to introduce our MC tonight. Those of you that were at the fentanyl overdose event will remember Kiera, who's phenomenal and much better at this than I am. Come on up.
I wear my heels today so y'all can see me over the podium. Last time I looked at the video later and I was like this. So I wear my tall shoes for y'all. Little area of business. If you are here for CEUs, please raise your hand. Oh, yes, I love it. There is a survey on the back table. I need you to fill that survey out. It goes to myself and to Dr. Rojas and CPN. We need those to continue to do these things. And second part is welcome. Does anyone know what September is? Woo! That's amazing. Without raising your hand or anything like that, can we get a hand clap for those people in recovery? Now on to why you're really here. So who here tonight saw Dr. Rojas's name on the flyer? Anytime his name is on anything, people just flock. So we want to thank Dr. Julio Rojas for being our amazing speaker tonight, for putting this event together, as well as arranging all of our panelists here tonight. You are in for a treat. So thank you for spending tonight with us, and let's give Dr. Rojas a round of applause. No. Too quick. He's trying to rush me tonight, I feel it a little bit. You'll get several rounds of applause tonight. Let me go back and tell you a little brief story about Dr. Julio Rojas. So I've been in the industry for about 10 years now. This amazing man gave me the passion for what I do. He gave me a chance at doing what I do. He's taught me everything I know. And as you can tell, I'm shaking because I love this man truly, deeply. What he does for our community is beyond anything we could ever ask for. He is an advocate for those in recovery at the highest level, down to the lowest. This is a man that you can call and he will have a candid conversation with you about any topic that you need. This is a man that will go to battle for you, whether professionally or personally. This is a man that I've seen stand beside so many professionals in the industry and give them a voice. Actually help them to get their license back, to be able to provide services for people in this room. Doctors, attorneys, lawyers, you name it. I could read you his CV, but we would be here all night. But what I do want to tell you is this man has been impactful all across the state, all across the United States. He has helped advocate for treatment facilities. He has been above and beyond at the University of Oklahoma's psychiatry department. I will read briefly just a little bit of his CV. Forgive me for reading verbatim. He has a lot on there. He was the past president of the Oklahoma Psychological Association and past chair of the College Assistance Program for OPA, which is Oklahoma Psychological Association. From 2014 to 2016, he served on the American Psychological Association's Advisory Committee for Colleague Assistance. So if you don't know what all of that means is this man, he has dedicated his entire life to help those in recovery, no matter where you are. You can be the person on the street, you can be someone who is in the industry, you can be someone who is a doctor who is struggling. This man will go to battle for you. His knowledge far exceeds this piece of paper. I actually asked him tonight if I could not read his CV, just to tell you exactly. But this man, y'all are sitting in front of a legend. Without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Julio Rojas.
Well, folks, I don't know. All I can do is mess it up now, right? If I talk, I mean, there's no. But it's been my passion and privilege to do this. This month is actually 30 years that I've been doing that. So let's get to it. Thank you for that lovely, probably the best introduction I've ever had in my career. Thank you for that. Okay, so healing over time. Understanding neurobiological changes of addiction and recovery. And these are the disclosures on a couple of grants, the Tribal Opioid Response Grant and the COAP grant. And Lindsay Hurst is responsible for securing those and a lot of the other great work that she does to make sure that we can help folks. Okay, so we're going to talk about addiction as it unfolds in 3 phases. I like to talk about addiction is a relationship. I think most folks can understand a relationship. I talk about it in 3 phases. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about how functionally and structurally things begin to change with the initiation of substance abuse. And folks, these changes are predictable and characteristic. They're so characteristic we could sort of map them out. And when I talk to an individual, just in the way they're talking and communicating, I can get a sense of where they're at in that disease process. And because this thought process, these emotional reactions, these behaviors have been plotted out. We know what it looks like on the way down into addiction, and we know what it looks like on the way out of addiction. And so a lot of good people have spent some time putting that together. So I'll talk about some key aspects of recovery, which is really what I'm here to do. There are folks in this room who could do this talk. There are a few in this room who think they can do this talk. I can feel them, like I know they're in here. And then there's folks I think that really need to hear this talk. If you're on the ropes because of this disease tonight, if you're a family member in the gut-wrenching agony of the vicious cycle this thing creates, you're in a room with a wealth of resources. There's parents helping parents. There's a number of individuals here that walk this journey, and they'd be happy to tell you what they did to have some peace and serenity. So shake a hand, meet someone, go up to one of these tables. And if you're battling this illness, there's somebody in here that knows exactly how you feel, that has been exactly where you are. And I'd like for you to meet somebody that's got, a few years of recovery. That's the living embodiment of this program and what it offers individuals. So I hope you'll do that. That's really what this is about. That's why we've come here tonight. Okay, so let me start with gratitude. These were my early mentors, and that's Marilyn P. And Marilyn was cunning, baffling, and powerful. And she was 20 years sober when I met her. She ran a small 28-day Minnesota model treatment center. And folks, we save our most vicious contempt for mothers and women who are afflicted with this illness. We say terrible things towards them and about them. Like think of your children, as if they would not think of their children. And I want to hold Marilyn up, and Biden, and Joe, and Eleanor, and some of these other women who took me under their wing as a new early career person and said, we're going to take you to open meetings, we're going to let you listen to the Joe and Charlie tapes, we're going to take you to more meetings, we're going to take you to big book studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, for a moment, I thought they were doing prevention work when I was in my early 20s. I thought these guys are just a little too invested and too motivated. And but I'm so very grateful for the time they took and the love that they poured and the energy they poured into me, because they are the ones who have helped me understand this and be more effective in my job. And folks, back in these days, these folks didn't have licensure numbers. Joe got his training at Huntsville Correctional Facility in Texas, right? Some of these folks got their training in therapeutic communities. They didn't have licenses, but they had an intimate understanding of this illness. And for that, I'm very grateful to them. Okay, so these are the 2 books I got early on in my career. And I can tell you I've read many books over 30 years, and still to this day, there's nothing I find out there that I can't go back and find in these two books. So if you're a professional or if you're beginning this journey, I would recommend you spend some time in these two books. And an individual such as myself is actually referred to in this book. In the foreword to the second edition, Roman numeral 20, I am referred to as an able and persistent advocate. And that's an appropriate title. And so, to those of you in recovery, what I would say is if you meet someone that doesn't get it, don't give up on them. Sit down with them. Try to help them understand. Try to cultivate people that are going to be excited about doing this work, because we need more people doing this work. And so, just because they don't understand doesn't mean they don't deserve a chance to kind of understand it and get it. Some of you may have family in that same situation. Okay, this is the Jelinek curve, and what I want you to just look at is a predictable path that unfolds over time. All of those, you probably can't read them, but those are symptoms of this illness. And I've never felt like I deserved a paycheck to sell somebody down here that they suffer from alcoholism, right? They come in, they tell me everything's going on. I say, well, you suffer from alcohol use disorder. That's what they prefer us to use. I say alcoholism because words have meaning. And cancer doctors don't say abnormal cell growth disorder. They say cancer, and it has a distinctive ping. So when I say alcohol use disorder to someone with alcoholism, they calculate that's about 2 or 3 more years that they can drink. And I don't want them to do that. So anyway, that's why I call it what it is. But we focus a lot of time over here, and clinicians do, and family members do. And but look, there's a whole other graph over here, right? These are symptoms of the journey of recovery. And if you're a clinician, when's the last time you talked to your patient about a symptom of recovery? You know, something that they're doing. If you're a family member, you know, you've been resentful, angry, and bitter, so it'll probably be hard to have too much joy in that they're anywhere. By the way, I also show this to patients and say, family and friends appreciate your efforts is way up here. See, my folks want the parade down here, like 2 weeks sober, right? So I say, look where that is. That's, you know, that's time. Like you got to, but this disease is so cunning, it gets in their head after 2 weeks sober, and if they're not getting enough pats on the back, you know, they start to get twisted up mentally. So I like this graph because it shows us where things begin to unfold. And up here at the very top is enlightened and interested in a new way of life. So anyway, if you've never seen that, it's good to take a look at that. All right, so here's the brain. And a few things, because it is a wonderful organ and it does wonderful things. You can see that it regulates our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and relationships. And our brain has more inhibitory functions. So inhibitory, our brain is wired to pump the brakes if we want to slap somebody in the mouth. It's designed to pump the brakes if we're diabetic and we see those cookies over there. Worse than that, free cookies, right? There's cookies and there's free cookies, right? So if you're diabetic, you probably have to pump the brakes and think about your A1C and all that stuff. And so every day, all of us have a brain that's trying to regulate our behavior, not do things that are impulsive and get us in trouble, manage our urges and our instincts to do and say things. Even now as I'm doing this talk, my brain's trying to regulate thoughts. My brain's trying to regulate my emotions, right? And so when it works well, folks, life is good. But then, I want to talk to you about this. So in the early 90s, we would spend like an entire weekend at conferences studying this very thing. You remember that term, the first high? So these were the slides we would look at, and we'd see that presynaptic terminal button and that postsynaptic terminal button, and we'd see these dopamine receptors, and man, we thought we had found the answer that was going to eradicate addiction in the 90s with this particular thing. All weekend looking at these kind of slides. And the assumption was that from the very first use of substances, the person was doomed to go down that track. Well, that didn't make any sense because more people use drugs and become addicted to drugs, right? So that couldn't be the whole story, and obviously we know more now than we did then. But back when this was going on in the 90s in Orlando, Florida, we were just real excited about it. And today it just looks like an old outdated slide because we were too narrow in our view that it was just about dopamine, that it was just about a neurotransmitter. Okay, now before I show you the 3 phases of this relationship, I want to show you a video, a 3.5-minute video about it. And then we'll go ahead and talk through these phases.
At take 5, you stay in your car because we're faster than you think.
Oil change is done. That was so.
the first phase of this deal is what I'd like to refer to as the honeymoon. In any relationship, there's a wonderful, glorious, and powerful honeymoon phase. Unfortunately, drugs of abuse are 2 to 10 times more reinforcing than natural things. Holding your grandchild, going to a park, sunset, little Bon Jovi on I-40, those kinds of things. Oh, we got some of that generation in here. Now, see, if I said Justin Bieber, Taylor Swift, I probably got a little different reaction. Okay, and folks, if you want to know what's going on with this opioid epidemic, you know, when you talk about drugs like oxycodone, Dilaudid, and fentanyl, those are major, highly addictive substances, and so those are not even on the 2 to 10 times more reinforcing, right? And they have a powerful effect on an individual. So, you know, we used to talk about this idea of hijack, and basically, if we took the brain and we divided it along this line, that top part, prefrontal cortex, allows me to do this lecture, made it so that you can be here on this date and time, helps us weigh the pros and cons, it's our reasoning, it's our judgment, and this is our more animal pleasure-driven instincts, right? Food, sex, those kinds of things. I gotta keep it G-rated, we got little ones, but the limbic system is the driver of all of those things, and certainly it brings us euphoria and pleasure. And so, I think it's not only that when the individual initiates their use of a particular substance that's the problem, it's if they have a certain predisposition. And we'll talk about what some of those are. So it's not so much that it's a hijack at the first use, it's the start point for that individual when they come to it. And folks, the reactions that my patients have had to medicines are not normal. And I'm going to talk to you about normal and not normal. But my folks have described this as a transformative experience. And, you know, in any honeymoon stage, the problem is what? We focus on the good. We focus on the positive, right? And so for one of my patients, 2 years sober now, the light finally came on for him that intoxication equaled happiness. Like he had never put that together, but that's what it meant. To be intoxicated meant to be happy. And it was only when he was intoxicated that he was happy. And so today he could see that as an insane thought. So, here's Nora Valco talking about that her research revealed that, of course, we try not to use the word addicts, but anyway, that they're less sensitive to the effect of dopamine, that for some individuals, they don't respond to the natural, normal things in their environment like the rest of folks do. Exercise, concerts, you know, that they seem to be in a deficit in that way. And because of that, they have to look to other things to kind of kick that system into gear. And one of those things, obviously, are drugs that are 2 to 10 times more powerful than naturally reinforcing things. So her work has shown that there's something going on here that is different. And I would say that that difference precedes the initiation of drugs and alcohol. So back in the 90s, we used to think you use drugs, it affects you, something happens along the way, and those effects are the result of substance abuse. That's what we used to think. Now we think there's actually differences before you ever pick up substances, right? And those differences predisposed you to this abnormal reaction to these substances. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of these abnormal reactions. Here's one. I knew from the first pill that I felt uplifted and changed. This is hydrocodone, by the way. I had energy, could take care of everything. My lifelong anxiety with inadequacies as a daughter, mother, wife, and a healthcare provider were gone. I began to desire more and more of that feeling. By the time I realized I was in trouble, I found I could not stop no matter the consequence. Now, if anybody in here has taken hydrocodone, and I'll tell you my story, I get nauseous, I get queasy, I sleep, and I never finish that damn bottle. Never. Not one time. Right? This reaction, first pill, and for some of you, I know you're stuck on this idea of control. You can control it, and what I would submit to you is that if she took that for the first time, and this is what happened, how much conscious control did she have of that? Wasn't predictable. She could have not anticipated this, and yet this is what happened. So I know for those of us that think on this as a control issue, a lack of control or inability to control, there was no control over this reaction that she had. Sure, she took the pill, like the doctor had prescribed the pill, but what happened next was not under her control. At a dinner hosted by socialites, I felt a rush of fear and ineptitude and self-consciousness sweep over me. I took a drink and lo, the miracle, that strange barrier that existed between me and all men and women seemed to instantly go down. I felt I belonged where I was, I belonged to life, I belonged to the universe. I was part of things at last. Oh, the magic of those first 3 or 4 drinks. Have you ever had that experience? Well, some of you have had that experience. But for those of you that haven't, was that your first experience with alcohol? Some of us probably got sick, it burned, it was terrible. And so what I would submit here is this was not a typical reaction, and that this reaction was not under this individual's control. Now, to keep y'all awake, I got a gift card in my pocket for Sonic. If you can name this individual, whoever names it first. Who said it? Bill W. Good job. Thank you, Richard. All right. It makes you want to ask what he drank, right? What was that drink that yielded, that manufactured that reaction? All right, so what are the predispositions that move a person in that direction to have that reaction? Well, we know family history is a big chunk of the pie. We think half of the pie related to risk is related to family history. And another risk is early onset. We know the brain develops into the early 20s. So imagine if you pick up at 12 and 13, what mechanisms and structures you're disrupting in the developing brain at 12, right? If the brain develops to the early 20s, right? In those 10 years, what are the kinds of things we would expect a young person to deal with? Heartbreak, anger issues, impulse control, right? Some of those kinds of things. That development, that natural development becomes disrupted by these substances, right? They don't learn how to hear the word no, they don't learn to deal with breakups, they don't learn how to respect boundaries, and so those problems are the very problems that we're going to treat in treatment centers, right? Rules and boundaries, and you can't go on past, and and in some cases, watching 52-year-olds have tantrums. But if you know why that's happening, then you don't take it personally. You understand that that's a mechanism that did not develop. Psychiatric illness certainly is a big one. Depression, anxiety, other types of psychiatric illness. Self-medication is common. Trauma, obviously, is a big factor. Telescoping effect in women, that means women get sicker quicker no matter the drug. Your careers won't be as long as the careers of men. And that has to do with a lot of things, muscle mass, size, fat content, and the lack of an enzyme in the lining of your stomach, alcohol dehydrogenase, that breaks down alcohol. So basically for women, you get more neurotoxic, non-metabolized alcohol circulating through your body, and it butchers the body. Right? So telescoping is a big, big deal. And then certainly there's the type of substance by the method. So you talk about smoking drugs like meth. The drug, by the way you use it, kicks up the risk factors. And so smoking being the quickest way to get a substance to your brain. Doesn't have to circulate lungs to brain. And so anyway, these are certain the things that certainly go with that risk of having that abnormal reaction. And part of our problem with the opioid epidemic has to do with the type of substance, fentanyl, a very powerful opioid. And really, no matter the method of administration for that one, it's so powerful. All right. Now, let me me ask you a question. Everybody in here's been in a relationship, good ones, bad ones. And so, back to our two individuals. In the midst of this wonderful, glorious, transformative relationship, but newly discovered, right? You just feel great. How many of you have ever, in the honeymoon phase of a relationship, said, I think I want to break up? Raise your hand. If in the honeymoon phase of any relationship, it occurred to you that maybe you should end the relationship. It doesn't occur to you. You'd be nuts to end a relationship in a honeymoon. We love that stuff. The oxytocin, 3 a.m. phone calls, the flowers, and all the stuff that goes with it. We love that stuff. Nobody would ever break up at that phase. And yet we want this patient and we want Bill W. to say, hey, that's a risky response. You should quit right there. Right? It doesn't make any sense. Nobody would. And so what do? Well, we do like anyone else would do. We begin to get to know the relationship, right? We get to know, well, for drugs and alcohol, how much, how often, which ones. This to wake up, this to go down. We start to get real familiar. And because of that, there's going to be a lot of learning going on, right? And euphoric recall, in the literature, the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking the first drink, right? At once. And because of that, there's euphoric recall. Some of you have had the experience that when you know you're going back out, just knowing and starting that process gets the juice flowing, right? So, these are powerful, powerful learning mechanisms that have to do with reward and motivation. And then come the mental gymnastics, right? The things you start to tell yourself about why things happen. And, why you're at the hospital for the 6th time in 18 months, right? And folks, it's never the drug. Never, never, never the drug. And I'm thinking of one particular patient, she believed that. She absolutely in her heart believed that those hospitalizations had nothing to do with alcohol. They had to do with old age, they had to do with fibromyalgia. And then 6 months sober, she looks at me and she says, you know what, Dr. Rojas, I think I figured something out. I was drinking myself to death. And I was like, tell me more about that, right? Because that was the first time that she was able to connect that. And I think that's what's frustrating for people that don't get this illness is that, like, how could you not? You got 5 DUIs. Let's walk through this. And then the person's able to say, but you don't understand. I was drinking with Jim, and the cop was dirty, and he was waiting for me, and they know my car, and like all that stuff, right? And they're being honest. They're being honest, right? It's everything but the relationship with the substance, because it's going to be a long time before they see that clearly. And some of us counselors in our early career, we would say things like, well, can't you see that with 5 DUIs, you got an alcohol problem? Well, they can't see that. They got a marital problem, they got a job problem, they got a post-COVID problem, right? And they believe that. And that's the kind of nature of this illness. So what are they going to do? They're going to say things like, you don't understand. You've never been there. You've not dealt with what I deal with. And if you did, you would be high too. Right? They say stuff like that because now you're trying to interrupt something. Now, go back to when you were in that bad relationship. You remember how many people were telling you, waving you off? Grandma was shaking her hand saying, hey, bad relationship. Right? Everybody. Even that person's friends were saying that's a bad relationship you're in, right? And what do? We say things like, but you don't understand, right? We get each other. We're connected. We're soulmates. See, some of you are, so this has turned into a codependency talk. All right. So, salience of the positive. That means that my patients can recollect July 4th at the lake with vivid clarity. They can tell you all about it, how much fun it was, and they never get to the part where the cops come. but they tell you everything about all that other. And so they have a salience for that. Those memories they have a salience for good feelings. We see this in groups sometimes if somebody starts talking about, glamorizing and war stories, man, you get everybody in the group just gets activated, and all of a sudden you've got a big discussion. But then ask somebody how they feel and the room goes quiet. Like you can't get a soul to talk because you're talking about something that's less comfortable. Amnesia for the negative means that the positive stuff gets filed way up here and the negative stuff way down here. Breaking a promise to my daughter, down here. Not showing up for her birthday, way down here. July 4th at the lake, way up here, right? And so this is the cunning nature of this illness and how it taps into these, we have this insanity in other parts, like when a woman gives birth, right? And all the changes and all the effects of the relationship, right? And then they have the insane thought they want to do that again, right? That's some of that. Sorry, Kenzie. But that's what happens, right? They tell you my body, my relationship, my marriage, my this, my that, and then what? A few months later, pregnant, right? And we don't ever say that's insane, right? Because we can have amnesia for negative events in our lives that help us move forward. And addiction as a cunning illness loves to tap into our amnesia for the negative. The further we get out from pain, the harder it is to remember it, which is why this is a chronic and relapsing disease, because you get 5 years and you're breaking your damn arm, patting yourself on the back, right? And you're getting swollen about how this thing's going, and you make a decision that maybe you can start drinking again, normally. So, in treatment, this is probably the hardest part to confront in the patient, because they're not going to tell you this stuff. They don't want to tell you this stuff. Yes, Mr. Counselor, it's bad. Yes, Mr. Counselor, I've learned my lesson. Yes, sir. And sure, I've learned it from meth, but I can still smoke pot, and I can still drink, and I can still do some other stuff. Right? But sure, Mr. Counselor. Got it. And so, in my work, I really like to get at this part of it, because we don't like our patients to talk about what those drugs did for you. And if they're not talking about that, then we really can't understand the connection they have to that substance. And they do have a connection to that substance, right? And it is a lifelong connection. So I'll have patients 20 years sober, and they'll see a bottle of peach vodka. And I'll say, damn, they didn't have peach vodka when I was drinking. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to drink, but that thought at 20 years sober is alcoholism, right? Not alcoholism, right? And at 20 years sober, she knows what to do with that thought. But the fact that she had that crazy thought is alcoholism, right? She knows at 20 years what to do, but she did not have conscious control of that thought coming into her head. And as a family member, you shouldn't panic, right? She's called her sponsor. She's done some of the things she needs to do. All right. Well, you notice in our little illustration up here, right, our little kiwi, he starts to get bumps and bruises, and he shakes them off. But then comes that love-hate cycle. And I know some of you have been in that cycle, right? Where you can't live with them, you can't live without them, you're back and forth. One day you want to, the next day you don't want to. And this is where a lot of our folks will find themselves. Now notice this transformation up here, neurobiologically. You remember in our first slide, these arrows were broad arrows. In other words, those stopping and those, oh wait, I'm still not at the, no, sorry, this is not correct, sorry. Okay, this limbic system is getting ready to crank up. It has been unfolding, and now the individual is going to be aware that his relationship with that substance may be problematic because somebody thinks so, right? Spouse, an employer. And the shift here now is one from the substances doing something for them, and now they're starting to do something to them, which they're starting to have some consequences. But folks, at this phase, it's all cellular, right? The body needs these substances to function, right? The physician needs those opioids to perform, right? And in the absence of those, they get sick. And this is the vicious cycle, because now, even if you wanted off of those, it's very hard to get off of those. And certainly Matt has helped this to some extent, but in my experience, going somewhere that's sober and safe for a period of time is essential when you can't pull out of this cycle. And this is where family members plead for jail cells. You know, they plead for anything except that phone call at 3 a.m. And folks, when somebody's here and they tell you they want to get help, please don't tell them be serious this time. Please don't tell them you better mean it this time. You know, think about you're talking to someone who's very, very sick, right? And for whatever reason, there's this little window right in there where they're willing to say, I want to go somewhere and do something. And the last thing they need is to hear something negative like that diminishes whatever little spark they might have to get better. But in this particular phase, it's broken promises, it's a vicious cycle, and they want off. They want off this vicious cycle, but at this point, it's all cellular and neurobiological. They got to get it. And so when we look at this clinically, you know, those of you that are clinicians, we see that basically we're stripping the brain, right? We're eliminating control, autonomy. We're eliminating their social instincts to show up, love and care for the people around them. And then we're eliminating the key instincts, which is survival, right? Survival. To use substances that could take your life. And so in this stage, folks, nothing should surprise us. Broken promises. I've had patients break bones, jump off a roof, take a box cutter to their leg to get pain pills. Right? You think that's conscious? You think that's rational? That is pure, driven by primitive instincts to feel the effects of that substance and what those substances do, whether it's eliminate pain or numb you or whatever. So folks, when a person is in this state, it shouldn't surprise us that a doctor would sell pills to support their habit. It shouldn't surprise us they'd be under the influence doing surgeries. It shouldn't surprise us when a mother does whatever she does. Those things should not surprise us, but they do. And I think they do because you don't understand. For a lot of people, they don't understand what's going on at this level. And at this level, that brain must get those drugs. So, Vernon Johnson. And I'll just read this second paragraph. He was talking about alcoholics in his book. Evade and deny outright any need for help whenever they are approached. Don't need it. I got this. Right? You said I have alcohol use disorder, not alcoholism. I'll come back when I have alcoholism. Right? It must be remembered that they are not in touch with reality. But even at their sickest, remember at the end where the kiwi was it was dark and bleak, and even at their sickest, they are capable of accepting some portion of reality if it's presented in forms they can receive. Now see, that's the trick. In forms they can receive. Now I found it helpful to get somebody in recovery to talk to somebody like this, because that's a form they can receive. Some of us who are better trained can offer hope and a path forward in that narrow window, and they will receive it. But I can promise you, folks, here's a form they cannot receive: shame, guilt, blame, anger, resentment, bitterness, contempt. they're not gonna be able to receive that. Because at that moment, you become the problem, not the substance. You become the problem. Your intolerance, your judgment, your prejudice. You see, it allows them to shift the focus. And you walk right into that if you're not understanding what's happening. You can walk right into that. So, there are a lot of people in this room that would go meet somebody and talk to somebody about this journey, gladly, all around, at the tables in these chairs. And these are people who are very well qualified to capitalize on this moment, this window. And we need them. And you should get to know some of them because they may be of wonderful help. Okay, now this, I like to refer to this as the Honorable Judge Ken Stoner section. So, and this is because he attended my talk many years ago, and he says, well, Julio, do you have anything uplifting to say about this disease? Like now, we're all down, depressed, and it's coming, and we're on the road. Could you say something on the positive side? So, Judge Stoner, if you get to watch this at some point, this is your section. And so, first of all, let's go back to our Jelinek curve. And here's your homework assignment. Go read the symptoms on this side of the graph. Go read that. And the next time your loved one, does something that's on this side, talk about that. Point that out. Because they're tired of hearing about this. I mean, they've heard about that for years. I mean, that's right. But we're not very good at looking at and holding up folks when they're doing, back to that slide where the control and the social instinct and the instinct to live goes away. When you see them in rehab, what happens? A little bit of sun, a little bit of light, a little bit of water, a little bit of food, and their desire to live returns. And then you find out they're helping new people in the treatment center. Like they're being big brothers and big sisters. Like they're taking an interest in their fellow man. Right? This is just days and weeks sober. And then they learn to control their emotions and control their thoughts. So the beauty of working in residential is you get to see that unfolding. Right? All the stuff on this side. But I've never read a discharge summary that talks about all the stuff on this side. Have you, Dr. Kuhn? Have you ever saw a discharge summary that says they're being honest, they're helping another suffering addict alcoholic, they're using less statements of denial, they're taking more ownership? I've never read that discharge summary because we're all over here talking about this stuff. And so one day I'm going to read that discharge summary that just says they do this, they do this, they do this, they do this, and they're not looking for a parade at 2 weeks sober. That would be an awesome discharge summary. Here's a good, so this is Dr. Hamid Akhtari. And folks, this work was pioneered at Laureate Brain Institute in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Right? Now, have you heard anything about this institute and this man's work? So he's using neuroscience to actually help us figure out how to accelerate the recovery process from a brain perspective. In initial sobriety, right? Initial abstinence, and during sustained abstinence. Like he's literally mapping out how we help people heal using neuroscience. Right? Man, that's good stuff. Right here in Oklahoma. Never makes the paper. Right? And this stuff's worldwide. Over 100 languages. And so this excites me. This is the kind of stuff when you non-recovering individual, but very passionate about addiction recovery. So somebody got to him, and they infected him with this enthusiasm. And this is what this man went out and was doing across the globe. Some of you know these 12 steps. 12 simple steps to manufacture change in your life. All right? Now, back to my patient, 2 years sober. The new thought. recovery equals consistent happiness. 2 years sober, that thought is the new thought. Educated man, bright, IQ way higher than mine, right? But it took him 2 years to stumble upon this simple thought, right? This simple thought. It is a cunning illness. It will not allow a person to see what they need to see. Now, hopefully he picks up the pace and some other things become clear, right? Hopefully it doesn't take 2 more years to get the next thought and the next thought. But notice, for those of you that are not familiar, there are 4 steps devoted to self, right? To self. And some of you have walked this, you know it very well. But these are steps that put you right in the 3 dimensions of your existence with your higher power, with yourself, and with others. And there's a lot of work to do with self, right? And that's hopeful. We know how to get people well. Absolutely know how to do that. We don't control one's self-will and their willingness to take direction. That's what we can't control. Unless you're in a robe with a gavel. And then you can at least control that part. And does court order treatment work? Ooh, man. The research says court order treatment works because you get in there and at some point, maybe a new thought takes root. Right? Nobody would go to treatment. Right? Nobody would go to treatment if we waited for them to think they need treatment. Remember, this is a cunning illness, right? The treatment is the last thing from their mind. Marital therapy, divorce, those would be solutions. But not rehab. Rehab is for people that need rehab. And for folks in the groups of this illness, they may not need it. Okay, so tonight we're going to have a Q&A section. And this one always comes up, right? Well, why can my loved one have a couple years sober and then take a torch to their life? Like, I'm tired of doing that. Well, some of our panelists might speak to that tonight, but for me, what I found is the factors that have to do with sabotage a lot of times are rooted in secrets, trauma. Folks, it's hard to want to be sober when you want to end your life. When you fight ending your life every day, it's hard to want to be sober. Now, you may not know that because your loved one didn't tell you that, but that's the battle they have in their mind and heart. They're not even sure they'll be here. And you're talking about being sober. And you're talking about life goals and life plans. And then there's the thing where, for some people, when good stuff starts stacking up, they feel more cursed. They can't do anything with all that blessing other than worry that it's going to get taken away or they're going to mess it up. And so the fancy word for this is cognitive dissonance. When I'm getting cakes in my sobriety birthday, when I'm getting pats on the back, and grandma saying I love you, and all that good stuff. But inside I feel fake and broken and unsalvageable and unforgivable. That dissonance starts to eat at you. And then you go back to what's familiar, chaos and pain and heartbreak. So, when I talk about addiction as a cunning illness, it's independent of some of these other things that can happen: depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, PTSD, all those other disorders complicate that picture. Like any medical problem list, the more medical problems you have on that list, the more complex, the more difficult to have a good prognosis. Same in behavioral health. All right, here's some PET scans. Look at that. Healthy, patient with amphetamine use disorder, 14 months of abstinence. That's nice. If you're younger, that happens quicker. If you're older, not so quick. But some of you can get by with about 30% of your brain and do well, right? So these images have been around for a while. I mean, this is not new. But we love to say, you're damaged for life. your brain ain't gonna work right, never. Well, no, actually, in 14 months, looking pretty good. Now, you're still sick, right? If you ain't done recovery, if you ain't done some of this other stuff, you ain't well, but this is working well, which means you can translate that into doing some of the things you're being asked to do. So neuroscience is helping us a great deal because we can actually see some things happening. Folks, all the stuff that your loved one does for recovery helps neurobiologically. Sharing, laughing, loving, supporting, learning to identify feelings, hugging, right? Get the oxytocin going. Step work, spirituality, all of that stuff helps us. And you know, we've talked about the genetics of addiction and how it affects, well, you know, the study of epigenetics tells us that recovery can be transmitted forward. Right? So if we can inherit trauma transgenerationally, right, then epigenetics teaches us that recovery can be coded forward. And that's very promising. You know, that your kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids will have tools to manage thoughts, manage emotions, rely on their community, some of the good stuff. So epigenetics is helping us really be encouraged. And so this ascending spiral means on any long journey, folks, it takes time. There'll be good days, there'll be bad days. COVID brought a lot of backsliding. You know, we saw people not being able to connect, right? Not get to meetings. Telehealth has been wonderful. I'm thankful for it. But have you ever sat by a fire? A real fire? And then at the holidays, have you ever watched one on TV? Is there a difference? Big difference. There's a huge difference. So all of this is neuroscience. All of this. Talking, sharing, learning, building relationships. All of it contributes to healing. So that's a hopeful message. Now, not all individuals, not all groups bear the burden equally, and here's the slide to tell that story. How much more likely are Native Americans to die? 50 times. Or sorry, 50% more likely. You see that little map? Dark is bad. That's Oklahoma. Right? You see that? I think we are sitting right here. That's not light pink and that ain't white. Right? And counties to the south of us have it worse. Right? So look at the non-whites, Native Americans. That's Oklahoma. And the U.S. level, a little bit tighter. So as a state, not doing too good, and certainly for our Native American population. Those are alarming numbers. And so at this juncture of my career, I'm thrilled to death to be at CPN. All right. So at some point I'll tell somebody, man, we got to help you find your herd, right? And me and you, I'm not your herd, right? I can just help you. And somebody who's on the panel tonight shared with me in the appendices of the big book, there's a psychiatrist mentioned, Dr. Harry Tiebout, probably not pronouncing that right. But he nailed it when he said, you know, our job as mental health, behavioral health professionals, our job is to lower the defenses, to open the mind just enough to get that person to their herd, right? Whether that's Wounded Warriors, a sexual abuse support group, whether that's AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery, our primary job is to get that person with their herd. I love that because I think that's dead on. And I have certainly found that to be the case for me and my work. So, we've talked about this illness and how it works on the individual. I haven't mentioned how it works on their emotional functioning, but remember what I said earlier about the book, Alcoholics Anonymous? I'll summarize it like they summarize it. Terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. That's the emotional function. Does any of that sound pleasant? Summarized in 4 words. And some of you can relate to that. It progresses over time, folks, so guess what? It takes time to get better. Right? Here's one that really gets the families really bent out of shape, is that they're going to meetings, that all of a sudden they love the sponsor and they love the home group and they get excited talking about that. But you know, the family members, they're waiting in line for their love and their adoration and their thank yous, and they're like, they just can't, it goes all over them to see you so connected and happy and joyous, right? And like, well, what about us? Be patient. First they have to learn with their peers in recovery, and eventually that trickles back. But it's going to happen. It is a process, and it does happen. All right, if you're in this room tonight and you work in this field where you have a family member struggling with this illness, you are affected. You cannot not be affected by this. And in this room tonight, we have a number of individuals. We have veterans. We have groups that support families. We have therapists in the back that have family programs. Jessica Helmka back there has got family programs. I mean, there's a wealth of information in this room. So, I ran a little bit over, so I'd like to not take questions and then maybe cover questions when we get to the actual panel. This part of the presentation has been recorded, but all recording will stop now. We've been assured of that. And those of you in the media, do not record this part, audio, video,